on your payroll. You can also spend part of it on either mortgage interest or rent, and you can spend some on utilities. But at least 75% of the money has to be spent on payroll. And then if you meet those criteria, then at the end of the 8 weeks, you sit back down with your banker, you prove what you spent the money on, and then that amount is forgiven. So basically, say you borrowed $50,000 in order to make this payroll, and you spent $45,000 during that 8 weeks. At the end of that time, that $45,000, if you spent it 75% on your payroll, that $45,000 is forgiven. You now have a 2-year, 1% interest loan for the remaining $5,000. There is no penalty for paying it back early, so you could cut a check for $5,000 right then and just pay it off. There might be some interest, but at 1%, it should be almost nothing. So you could just walk away and be free and clear at that point, or if you want to hold on to that money, then you can do that. You don't have to start making a payment until after 6 months. So even after the 8 weeks is over, you still got 4 more months before you have to start making any payments. So you've got time that you can decide what you want to do. If things get back and everything's going good again, then you could easily pay this off and not have to worry about it. Or if you just wanted to hold on to it, then you could make some very, very small payments on this and pay it off over the 2 years. So on April the 16th, the SBA announced that the funds had all been allocated. And at that point, the program was shut off. Now, those people who had already applied and had applications in the pipeline that have not yet been funded, once this new bill passes, those people will be first up to receive the PPP. Some banks still have their applications open. Others have taken them down and have said that they will put them back up once the bill passes. So this is, one of the things that we talk to clients about when they're first starting is that there's certain people you really need to develop a relationship with. And one of those is a banker. So many people do not have any type of relationship. These small businesses, they don't have any relationship with anybody at a bank. So they have nobody to turn to when something like this happens. And everybody knows it's so much about who you know. That's part of what Rotary is founded on. That can make such a huge difference if you can reach out to somebody that you actually know and they can guide you through the process. So we encourage all small business owners to have that relationship. Now, granted, not every bank and credit union was eligible to do this program. Not all are participating. But even if you did have a relationship with someone at a credit union that was not participating, I guarantee you those people have relationships with bankers and could have guided you as to what to do, to be able to be first in line to get this money. So, so many businesses, a lot of the ones that were calling Dave and myself had absolutely no clue about what to do with any of this. And they didn't know anybody, didn't have anybody to turn to. And then we were having to try to guide them to someone. And if they had just had that relationship to begin with, they wouldn't have had this problem. So I know, again, people have talked about the PPP and how all these big companies got all the money. There were some big companies that probably should never have applied for this that did. The biggest one that showed, because the SBA has been very transparent about everybody that has actually gotten this money. There was a company that was worth $405 million, publicly traded, that got a $10 million loan. Obviously, they had other sources where they could have received credit and never should have applied for this. But the SBA does show that 74% of all the money that was dispersed went to the very small businesses. In Texas, well, this was nationwide. There were a total of 1,661,307 approved loans. And it shows the net approved dollars was 342 million. The cap was 349, but obviously there's a little bit of difference because of fees and some others. Almost 5,000 banks across the country participated in this, and the average loan amount was $206,000. So you can see that there obviously were some very, very big loans and some very big companies that took advantage of this. So you can see from here, this is, again, like I said, the SBA is being very transparent. You can see that the majority of the loans that were approved were for $150,000 and under. So these would be your smaller businesses. That's the 74%. But yes, there were some that got the over 5 million, the 2 to 5 million, and there was a big chunk of money that went to those people too. But you have to understand in the SBA's regulations, if you have less than 500 employees, you are considered a small business. And I know for the little boutique that's out there that's got the owner and one part-time employee, that doesn't seem like that's a very fair comparison as a small business, but that is what the guidelines have always been. So these are the people that are eligible. So any small business with fewer than 500 employees, the 501c3s with fewer than 500 employees, and churches were originally said they were not eligible, and then that was changed on that weekend right after the program started, that churches were eligible to participate in this program. Any individual who operates as a sole proprietor, anybody that operates as an independent contractor, and there's so many people that are now independent contractors and so many businesses that really don't have employees, they just employ contractors. So they might not have been eligible other than just the owner, but those contractors themselves were eligible. And with the new gig economy, I think they went that way so that those people that are Uber drivers and waiter deliverers could actually apply for this loan and get some funding. So any individual who's self-employed and regularly carries on a trade or business, it can't be just your hobby, but if you actually are in business, then you are eligible for this loan. There's an additional $300 billion on the table that looks like it should be approved by the House tomorrow morning, and I'm sure the president will sign it sometime tomorrow afternoon, and by Friday, this program should be up and running again. I would suggest that if you're going to participate in this, you want to get your application in as quickly as possible, because when the entire country is applying for something like this, it doesn't take long for the money to run out. They did designate that $60 billion will be designated for smaller credit unions and community banks. And there are some alternative lenders out there. They're nonprofit organizations like Lift Fund and People Fund. There's some of these that the banks are supposed to do a certain amount of community reinvestment. And some of these bigger ones like Goldman Sachs, you may have heard that they donated $50 million to that was $25 million directly to Lift Fund, so that they could kind of spread who would be getting these funds. And so 60 billion of this is going to be going to entities like that to try to make sure that some of the underserved businesses will have access to these funds and not be shut out. The next thing is the economic injury disaster loan. And it was there for just as a stopgap measure for businesses that were going to have a severe loss in revenue. So maybe, you know, you're not a restaurant that got completely shut down, but you've got another business and you've just seen your business drop off 50 or 60%, which is the majority of the businesses out there. You could apply for the economic injury disaster loan. You can get up to $2 million. And that amount is based on, you have to prove what your revenue is, and then you show what your revenue was for the previous 12 months, basically for last year. And then you have to provide a list of expenses, a total schedule of expenses, and then you and a loan processor would look at this and decide how much you actually needed to be able to cover those expenses. The idea behind this loan is that if you were a healthy company going into this, you should be a healthy company coming out of this. If you were hanging on by a thread going into this, you should at least be hanging on by a thread coming out of this and not be any worse off. So the purpose is not to enrich anyone. The purpose is simply to at least let you maintain and get you through this crisis. As part of this loan, there is an advance. If you fill out the application on the last page, you click the box where it says, do you want the advance? And you can get an advance of up to $10,000 that does not have to be repaid. It has been, at first, the first things that came out made it sound like everybody was going to get $10,000 that applied for this, and that's not the case. The SBA pretty much based it on the number of employees that you have. So if you have 5 employees, you would probably be eligible for close to $5,000 on the advance. If you've got 70 employees, you could probably get the full $10,000 on your advance. But even if you don't take the loan, you do not have to repay that advance. And the advance is paid within 3 days of the time the loan is approved. And basically at the time the application is approved. So if you are shown to be eligible and you filled it out properly and provided all the proper paperwork, then that advance is put into your account. So far, 63,815 Texas small businesses have gotten over $287 million in the emergency advance. So that's an average of $4,500 per business that does not have to be repaid. So you can see that a lot of Texas businesses have taken advantage of this. Now, as far as the actual loans being approved and being dispersed, only 1,243, and this is as of yesterday, had been actually approved and had the funds dispersed. But that's $263 million that have been dispersed, an average of 211,000. So there's a lot of businesses that have already taken advantage of this EIDL loan, and there's more to come. There's also an express bridge loan, and any SBA lender that normally does SBA express loans can loan up to $25,000. So if you're in business and you've already applied for that EIDL loan, but you don't know when you're going to get it, because it could be a month or two before those funds actually are credited to you, according to how long the process takes, you could get $25,000 up front with this express loan, and then it's just rolled into that EIDL loan when it's issued. So it automatically be at the 3.75% rate, or if you're a nonprofit, it's at 2.75%. And those are based on 30 years. And again, this loan can also be paid off early, so there's no penalty involved, and you do not have to make the first payment on the EIDL until the 12th month after you receive the money. So if you're getting that money in May, it would be next May before you made the first payment. There's also debt relief. If anybody out there has a current SBA loan that you use to buy building, property, whatever it was, if you have a 7A or a 504 or a micro loan currently, the SBA will automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of those for the next 6 months. Now, that doesn't mean they pay the whole loan, because anybody that's gotten an SBA loan understands that if you've got a project that it costs, if it's $1 million, you had to put up 10%, the SBA would cover 40%, and a bank would cover 50%. But that 40% of that project, so the $400,000 that you borrowed through the SBA, the interest, principal, and fees on that will be paid automatically for the next 6 months. And then anybody that has an outstanding, well, that's later. So they will automatically do that for the next 6 months, but you need to contact your SBA representative and make sure that everything is being done the way it should be. And then in order to stimulate the economy as we come out of this, anybody that takes out a new 7A or 504 loan prior to September 27th, the first 6 months will be paid. So if you were looking at doing a business expansion and you think now is not the time, now may actually be the time to be able to get out there and get this done and have the first 6 months of the SBA portion of the loan paid for you. But that has to be done and approved by September 27th. If you have a current disaster loan, the SBA is providing automatic deferments on those through the month of December. The only caveat to that is if you have an automatic payment plan set up, you have to contact your SBA contact in order to get that to stop. So if you're paying, regular payment every month, well, then they will automatically defer it. But if you're doing a electronic funds transfer or whatever you want to call it, then you have to actually contact them and get them to stop it. And if you choose to just continue to pay it, you can do so. Now that is strictly a deferment. Interest still accrues. And at the beginning of next year, you would have to get with the SBA and work out a new payment plan. But it's still something that they're providing as debt relief to help you get through this crisis. They also announced the Federal Reserve Main Street loans. Now, these are not for your very small businesses because the minimum loan size is $1 million. But there's plenty of businesses out there that can take advantage of this. It's a 4-year loan. The payments, again, are deferred for the first year. It's between 1 and 25 million, and there's restrictions on how much you can get. And pretty much any SBA affiliated banks can make these loans. And the banks have the incentive to do this because the Federal Reserve is going to purchase 95% of that loan through what's called an SPV. Basically, it just means the Federal Reserve takes on 95% of the risk of that loan. So again, they're making it very easy for the banks to be able to make these. So those are the programs that are out there. Again, the EIDL loan and the PPP should be back in business either late tomorrow or early Friday. If you want to take advantage of those, you need to get in line now. If you do not have a relationship with a banker and you don't know where to turn, please call myself or call Dave, and we will help you get through that and hook you up with somebody or try to at least give you some options of who you can go through to apply for these. And I can tell you when the word went out, when Jackie sent the information out about the SBDC and put my name out there that we could be contacted. And I mean, I got emails one right after another, and it was at the same time, Stephanie Shoemaker contacted me and let me know that she and Mary Ellen Robertson were working with a local bank and helping them process these loans. And I sent them, I think, more people than they could handle, but through our Rotary network, it was amazing how many people were actually able to get in there and get the funding that they needed. And it happened very quickly, but again, it's taking advantage of the people that you know and those connections and getting them to work. And a lot of people, Rotarians that work at the banks and others that were assisting with the banks, really stepped up and made sure that other Rotarians got the help that they needed. And I'm very appreciative of that. So I know that most of this has to be handled more on a one-on-one basis. So I am very open to take any questions that anybody has. And, you know, if it's something very specific to just you, then probably, you know, call me afterwards. But if there's just a general program question, please, I'd like to open it up now for anybody that has one.
John, we probably have about maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I understand that, Joe, but I mean, I
see
can
if
bore
I
everybody to death with
no,
figures, but
I see a whole number with chats down there, about 21 of them. So maybe there's some out there.
Hey, John, this is Chuck Mason.
yes,
Uh,
Chuck.
one of the programs that's not directly related to this, but could certainly affect it, is the changes that they made on unemployment insurance with the bonus money that the feds were going to put into it. Have you gotten any feedback from your some of the smaller companies of how that's affected their employees? Frankly, a lot of the employees can make a lot more money on unemployment than they were probably making in most of those companies. Have you gotten any feedback on that?
Yeah, there's a few people that I'm working with that they've got employees that have said that, you know, they receive the payroll protection. And they said, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I've got a couple of employees that said they don't want to come back right now. Number one, they'd make less money than what they're making on unemployment. And then what about at the end of the 8 weeks? What if we're not back to work? Then I'd have to refile for unemployment and try to start that process all over again. Nowhere in any of the language on this does it say that you have to pay people for doing nothing. So you can be somewhat creative with this if you want to. I mean, those people are still on the payroll. You can still count them as employees if they haven't actually been let go, and they are just choosing not to come to work of their own accord. Then, you know, I would still say that they are still considered employees, even though they're collecting unemployment at the time. They're doing that as long as they're doing that because they have childcare issues, or even if they're just afraid to come to work. Maybe it's a restaurant situation where they're doing to-go orders and they're just afraid that, you know, maybe they've got an elderly person at the house that is staying with them and they don't want to be exposed to anything. Then you can pay the employees that are working. If those other employees have health benefits, you can use this money to pay those health benefits. But I mean, at the worst case scenario, if you get to the end of the 8 weeks and you didn't spend all the money, it just means that less is going to be forgiven. You still got that money that can either be paid back or can be held onto as a 1% interest loan. So it's not a bad deal one way or the other. And the people I've talked to have told them, just do what's best for your employees. And nobody says that you can't. These people that are coming to work every day, we've got some people with restaurants that their wait staff are now out delivering. And they said, you know, they're using their own gas and stuff. Well, then give them a raise. Give them a $2 an hour raise for the time that they're spending delivering, and pay for that with the payroll protection program. There's no SBA police out there that are coming around to look and see exactly what you're doing with all this money. You saw the numbers on everything that was being put out there. Just use common sense and do the right thing by your people. The whole idea behind this program was simply to keep people on the payroll and keep them to having a job. So yeah, Chuck, you're right. There's some people that, you know, they're saying, hey, it doesn't make any sense for me to come back to work right now because I'm getting paid plus that extra $600 a week.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
You should have some more there, Joe.
Yeah, I've heard conflicting information on the 8-week period if you're approved for the loan. Does it have to be the 8 weeks immediately after you're approved, or can you kind of pick your 8 weeks, say after you've applied but before you were approved?
The language states that is the 8 weeks from the issuance of the loan. So you are supposed to do it during that time period. And I know one larger restaurant that we're working with, you know, they said, well, they got funded fairly early, and they said, well, we're going to still have 2 weeks, you know, before June 30th. What if we're not even open yet? Then what do we do? Well, you know, again, they gave you 2.5 months worth. So pay your 2 months worth of payroll. You should still have some left over. Use that if you need to. You need to understand that's not going to be forgiven. But I mean, you're still taking care of your people and trying to keep them employed. And that's what the whole idea behind this program was to begin with. So it's not perfect, obviously, but both the idle loan and that idle loan, you can use that for any normal expenses. You can't use it to pay off another loan, but you can just do normal everyday expenses with that. And as long as you don't mix the funds in the two, then it won't affect the part that's going to be forgiven. But that they really did a very good job of trying to put together some programs that made sense and got some money in people's hands as quickly as possible so that they can make it through this.
Got anyone else for John? Well, thank you, John. It's been interesting. I guess you've got well, we have our Rotary numbers that others may want to maybe knock on your door sometime.
Yeah. I mean, Jackie sent out the information previously,
Okay.
and I guess we could send it out again and just put our numbers on there. But you can call myself, you can call Dave, and we will help you, walk you through this process. And again, don't wait until they say that the program has been signed back into law and there's more money in there. Do something now. If you can, if there's a way that you can go in and apply for something right now, you need to go ahead and do it. You need to get in line because it's just not going to last all that long. And I've heard some people complaining that about the websites. I know right at first when they opened up that idle, the website crashed. They went back and redid it and streamlined the application to try to help that out. But you have to understand the SBA, like when they responded to Harvey and did the disaster loans, that was 49 counties in one state that were affected. This is the entire country. And they're really not set up for this. So they're now trying to respond to a disaster that is a nationwide disaster. And their systems weren't designed to handle that kind of traffic. So they've done a lot of things to try to do the very best they can to handle this. But again, sometimes you just have to be persistent. The one that is persistent is the one that's going to end up getting the money. But again, anybody out there and anybody that that has, small businesses, tell them, and those of y'all that work in the banking industry, and I know there's a lot of you out there, talk to everybody you can. I'm sure you already do about establishing a relationship with a banker, because the reason why these big companies jumped in and got that money right off the bat was because they had that type of relationship. And so that they could immediately do it. And, just because you're a one-man show or a one-woman show doesn't mean you can't have that type of relationship where you can get in and have access to the same things that other people do.
Yeah.
But you have to do it yourself.
Well, thank you, John. This has really have been interesting. And I want to thank you for what you've done here, sharing this up to the date, news with us today. This is certainly really helpful to us. A lot have been going in the last couple of, I want to say, more than just weeks, maybe months, that people were getting into seeing what they can do and what can help. To express our appreciation, we'll make a donation in your name to the Rotary Foundation's End Polio Now campaign. It'd be great having you. We'll get something to you there, and I would like to say, I guess we're at this point now to go to closing. So the board of directors will be having a meeting next Tuesday using Zoom. And if you would like to be in the meeting also, please let Jackie know, and she will send you a link to the meeting so you could be there, so to speak. So I want to thank you all for attending the meeting today. I appreciate John, all that you have done, Uliana and Fred. Thanks all of y'all for being part of this too. And let's just say thank you for attending the meeting today. And as our tradition, let's close the meeting by saying the four-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. First,
Is it the truth?
and second,
Is it
fair to all concerned?
concerned?
third,
Will it be
Will
goodwill
it
and fourth.
will it be beneficial?
beneficial to all concerned?
Well, thank you. Have a good week and go out and connect the world. And I'll give a ring to the bell. And we're done. Thank you very much for the meeting today.
Aye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, crazy people.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin.
Are you doing a backstroke back there, huh?
You like my background,
Can
Hi,
you give John a
Kevin.
call?
Jack?
Kevin?
Yes,
I guess he signed out.
I'm here.
No, he's still there.
wanna
Thank you.
You want to give John Lee a call to answer your question?
Yeah, I gotta, I've been working with a CPA to get some of this done, but absolutely. You got a phone number for me?
Just a second. John, if you're still listening, shout out your phone number.
You can just email it to me, Jackie, if you get it.
I'll do that. It'll be easier. It'll be faster.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, see y'all later.
Bye.